This week in IT, Windows 11 market share just jumped past 62% after months of going nowhere. At the same time, Microsoft admits that barely 3% of Microsoft 365 users are paying for Copilot. And Redmond has reassigned senior leadership to focus on security and quality. So stay tuned for all the latest. Welcome to This Week in IT, the show where I talk about everything connected to Azure, Microsoft 365 and Windows. Today's episode is sponsored by our friends at Caresoft. StatCounter revealed this month that Windows 11 has just jumped past 62% of the market share. Now, StatCounter isn't obviously official statistics from Microsoft. These stats are essentially based on web traffic that it sees around the global internet, and it tries to determine the different share of desktop and mobile operating systems. So it's debatable exactly how accurate these figures are in reality, but we do know that according to StatCounter, at least over the last few months in 2025, that Windows 11 market share was essentially staying static and sometimes falling a little bit. But with the end of life of Windows 10 in October last year, it could be that there has been a push, especially in the enterprise, to get these Windows 11 deployments going if they hadn't already started. Now, we also know that from last week's news, Microsoft announced Windows 11 has reached the 1 billion user mark, and it reached that mark faster than Windows 10. So it's not all bad news for Windows 11 at this stage. Now, from a purely anecdotal point of view, if I go out and maybe I'm sitting somewhere with my notebook, I notice what other devices people are using around me. There are usually two variants. It's either a Mac or it's a PC running Windows 11. I can't remember the last time that I saw Windows 10 running on a PC in a public space, at least. So I expect all of this is really to do with enterprise adoption. Of course, we know that enterprises are much slower to move off of legacy operating systems for various reasons. It can be a massive undertaking if they're supporting thousands of users that are maybe geographically dispersed in different locations. It can be because legacy software doesn't work on Windows 11 or there are compatibility issues. There are all sorts of reasons. But of course, with the end of life of Windows 10, organizations are now either having to pay to get security updates for Windows 11, or they're having to essentially upgrade. So I think that, we could be seeing a little bit of a push here towards Windows 11, seeing a more gradual rise over the next year. Of course, this could just be a one-off, and next month we see a decline. We'll have to wait and see. But I think that now is the time that Windows admins probably have to accept that Windows 11 is the version of Windows that you should, of course, be standardizing on. Nobody wants to have to manage Windows 10, Windows 11 devices, all in the same organization. The sooner that you can get everything running one operating system, the more secure and the more stable and the better you will be able to support your end users. Let me know in the comments how far along you are with your Windows 11 deployment, or are you paying for security updates for Windows 10? I'd love to know what's happening in your organization. Before I go on to the next story, I've got a quick favor to ask you. About 30% of the people who watched last week's video weren't subscribed to the channel. Now, as we go live today, we're on 13,928 subscribers. I'd love it if we could push that up to 13,950 this week. So if you'd like to see these weekly news updates from petri.com, please subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the bell notification to make sure that you don't miss out on the latest uploads. This may not come as much of a surprise, but Microsoft said this week that only 3% of Microsoft 365 users are paying for Copilot. Now, you can use Copilot, of course, without paying for it in Microsoft 365, so it doesn't necessarily reflect that people are not using Copilot. But what it does, of course, say is that Microsoft is struggling to change Copilot usage into actual revenue. Now, this week there have been lots of stories about the AI kind of uneasiness of investors affecting the stock market for tech stocks and shares essentially have been plummeting, and there's a little bit of uneasiness that this could be a bubble. And this has been going on now for a few months, but this latest information from Microsoft isn't going to really help. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's been reported that organizations are waiting to really see proof of productivity and return on investment for AI. Of course, I completely understand that. But for me personally, at least, AI isn't so much about productivity, but about what I can actually do that I wasn't able to do before because I just didn't have the expertise or the resources to do it. So you could argue there's a little bit of productivity involved in that, but they were just things that I didn't necessarily consider part of my job description to do because I just couldn't do them, but now I can. And potentially, and this might be a little bit controversial, is about the quality of what I'm able to produce. So what I mean by that is, I'm not a graphic designer, but if I needed to produce an infographic or something like that, with the help of AI, I'm able to produce something faster and of higher quality than I would be able to without it. Now, of course, there's lots of people talking about AI slop and all the rest of it, and that is a problem. But if you use AI as a tool and you invest in it, learn how to use it, understand what it can do and can't do, it can actually be used to benefit you in terms of quality and productivity. So I think organizations need to look at AI not just from a productivity point of view. What does it allow their staff to do that they weren't able to do before? And what about the quality of what they're producing? Is AI making it better or is it making it worse? So I think just looking at AI from a productivity standpoint is maybe a mistake, but well, that's what's happening right now. And that's probably why there's a limit to the amount of uptake that Microsoft's getting for its paid Copilot in Microsoft 365. Now, if you imagine Microsoft 365 has 450 million users around the world. So 3% equates to just 15 million paying customers, and it's quite expensive. So it's not a kind of automatic add-on. It costs $30 per user, and that's something that you need to really consider to make sure that it's going to be beneficial to your company. So this probably explains a lot of the hesitation from organizations to pay for users to have this. Microsoft is doing a little bit of a shuffling around of its senior leadership team. So they announced this week that their security chief, Charlie Bell, is stepping aside to go into an individual role where he'd be focusing on engineering quality. Microsoft observers have been commenting that they think Charlie Bell was probably preparing for retirement. So it's not that necessarily that he's being forced out, but this is probably something that's been agreed, and it's just a convenient time to make this change in the senior leadership team. And Microsoft has also been talking in the last week about how they're hoping to focus on the core of Windows 11 this year to make it more stable and reliable rather than on new features. So with this change in leadership and with those new promises being made, hopefully we'll see some improvement in the quality of patches and the underlying stability of the operating system. Because as we all know, the updates to Windows 11 have been fairly disastrous in the last year or so. So what about the security chief position? Well, a Microsoft veteran, Hayat, I don't know whether it's pronounced Galot or Gallo, is returning from Google to take that position. And Satya Nadella has said that, she's able to bring durable, high quality experiences at a global scale, and that will be a core priority in her new role. So with this shuffle, it's kind of an admission maybe that Microsoft is recognizing that they have been eroding trust with IT organizations. They don't really trust in the reliability of patches. They don't really believe that security is being prioritized enough, although we could say at this point that Microsoft has probably prioritized security more than it ever has done, but they're still struggling to get a grip on various things like email security and all the rest of it. So we'll have to wait to see how this pans out in 2026. I'm going to leave leave you with another video now about some security issues with Windows 11 and Windows Server that you need to understand. So Kerberos RC4 is being taken out of Windows Server essentially this year, so you need to prepare for that and audit your environment to make sure that you don't have authentication failures happening, so do check that out. There's also an interesting story about some flaws in administrator protection. That's a new feature that's due to come into the stable channel of Windows 11 probably sometime in the first quarter. So do have a look at that. It's really interesting. If you found this video useful, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up because it helps to grow the channel. I'd like to thank our sponsors again, Caresoft. That's it from me for this week, and I'll see you next time.